parents of terrible people. What was the moment that you realized your child wasn't going to be a good person? She started acting out when she was about 12 and got worse and worse. We did all kinds of therapy, private schools, rehabs. We tried everything. Her dad, her stepdad, and all of her grandparents were on board with me trying to help her. But we couldn't keep her from sneaking out and getting in trouble unless we were willing to have someone up and watching her 24/7. It was exhausting. She's now just turned 28. I haven't spoken to her in about 6 months. She never changed. You can't trust her to have a visit because she will steal from you. I think when I realized that she was never going to change was when I bought her a plane ticket to help me move into my new place shortly after the death of her stepfather, and she couldn't be bothered to stop partying long enough to get on a plane. This was the last time I tried hard to be close with her. She was about 22 when this happened. It's the great tragedy of my existence. She's my only biological child, and when people ask me if I have kids, I lie and say no because thinking of her makes me want to die of shame. My parents think I'm a good person, and so do I, but definitely my dad took me aside before 8th grade and handed me a pamphlet that said how to stop being a bully. I'm thankful for your parents. I wish someone did this for the kids that chose to bully me in 8th grade. My aunt has a terrible child. We all knew from the start that he was a bad seed, except for her. That was her baby and he didn't need to see a therapist or get on medication. Starting around 4/5. He would torture animals. His favorite was kittens. My aunt would not get her cat fixed, so the cat kept having kittens. My cousin would torture all of them. The things he did to them is horrifying. I won't post details because it will make you sick. When he was around 11, he would chase me around with a butcher knife and talk about how he wanted to slice open my stomach. The torturing of animals never stopped. My aunt never sought help for him. My aunt bought some chickens one day to raise and get their eggs. He eventually killed them and laid their heads on his sister's pillow that spelled out the first initial of her name. All because she wouldn't buy him, a minor, cigarettes. He is in his mid-20s now and is constantly in and out of jail. My aunt doesn't believe in medication for mental health, nor does she believe in psychiatrists. She thinks that because she is his mother, she can solve his issues. My mom and I are afraid he is going to kill her one day. I'm not sure if he suffered from any sort of trauma as a baby or toddler. I can kind of speak on this as my mom had me at a young age and waited until I was older to have more children. My brother was always troubled as a kid. He would beat up my other siblings. He would lie to therapists and manipulate my mother. He got heavily involved in gangs when he was 14 and is now 17, serving a 3-year sentence for possession of drugs and firearms. I've always expected this is how it would go down. We always tried to help him and he would always be resistant. He was in a fantastic camp for troubled teens where he was put in charge of the kitchen and got good grades in his classes, and over a period of 2 months ran away and was on the run until recently being found in a gang's car with drugs and guns. I think everyone's different, but it was obvious from the start with my little brother. An ex-friend of mine is similar to your brother. Her parents had her at an older age, I want to say in their 40s. Anyway, said ex-friend turned out to have antisocial personality disorder, ASPD. The best way I can describe her is pure evil and your stereotypical definition of crazy. When I was a kid, I was often made to play with the daughter of my parents' friends who was an incurable butthole. Her goal in every interaction with anyone would be to make the other person feel embarrassed, or arrange for a situation where they would come out looking stupid or end up being wrong about something. I swear that was foremost in her mind all the time. She played the long game too. I suspect some kind of personality disorder. I spent a lot of time with her growing up, and to be honest, I think it did affect my self-esteem in social interactions. Her parents were really nice and sweet people, through and through. I don't know when they realized, but I know her mother once asked my mother, "What do you do when your child is in butthole?" Met her again for the first time in like 15 years after we happened to live in the same city. First thing she did was insult me, like 10 times, then berate me for not wanting her friendship. Met her again for the first time in like 15 years after we happened to live in the same city. First thing she did was insult me, like 10 times, then berate me for not wanting her friendship. I have to admit that I'm really curious about how you handled this as an adult. I actually just watched a TED talk that the mother of one of the Columbine shooters did regarding this. It was Dylan's mom. If you type in his name and TED, it will probably come up easily. It's really interesting. I'd link it but too lazy to find it again. I guess it's a bizarre not answer to your question, but I have kind of the opposite to what a lot of parent-child relationships have, which is that my parents are absolutely convinced that I'm a terrible person, even though as far as I'm aware, I'm not. It's difficult to explain exactly how. The best concrete example I can think of is that when I was a teenager, they wouldn't leave my kid brother alone in the house with me because they thought I'd intentionally hurt him. As an adult, I've asked them not to treat me like I'm bad and violent, and their response several times has been stop being bad and violent, then. Which would be a bit harsh, I guess, if I'd actually been a problem kid, but I wasn't. I was really miserable and crap, but literally the worst thing I ever did was have arguments with them. I've never hit anyone, broken plates etc, set crap on fire, tortured animals. I don't know what their problem was. Sometimes it was legit bad enough that I started wondering if I was somehow blanking out and doing bad things when I wasn't aware of it. Pretty sure I wasn't. Freaking fantastic way to do a number on a kid's self-esteem. But it has also made me legitimately terrified of proving them right, which means I'm basically the least aggressive person you'll ever meet. So, mission accomplished. I have a relative that treats their kid this way, except now at 18 the kid is everything they said she would be. I can't help but wonder if it's a chicken or the egg situation. Sometimes when they have a problem with her, I am more surprised by their actions than hers. Not a parent, a sibling. Throwaway for obvious reasons. My older brother very well falls into the terrible person category. We had a pretty big age gap, and I missed a lot of what transpired between my parents and my brother, but as I'm aging, I'm starting to understand a lot more. I'm getting pieces of the story from him and our mother, as our father passed away years ago now. I heard horror stories growing up about my brother, how he hit the cat, or lit the rug on fire, or wet the bed for years, and they were always sorta used as a measure for me, as the younger sibling, to do better. I didn't really register that they were really awful things as a kid, other than things I shouldn't do. He had trouble in high school, and ended up only getting a GED. He spent years jumping from job to job, as he most often would end up fired from one place or another for various reasons. When I went to community college, I tried to get him to go with me. He's plenty smart enough to go to school, just terrible at attending. He dropped out shortly after. I found out later, my father had botched paying the high school where my brother was attending. He had to scrounge and work after school to stay in school and graduate. This was right around the time of Columbine, and my parents were paranoid something would happen to him at a public school. My parents had been very hard on him as a kid, every time he had screwed up. Once I showed up, younger sibling, they essentially wanted him to start being independent, and they hadn't set him up for it, I don't think. My entire family, parents included, would clam up if you talked about emotions other than happiness. No one ever seemed able to talk about it, or it was impolite, or it wasn't to be discussed with anyone else. We were expected to process emotions by ourselves behind closed doors. And surprisingly, this resulting in huge arguments between my parents and eventually divorce, but that's another story. I'm not saying my parents were terrible. I don't think they were. I turned out okay, I think. I just don't think they knew how to deal with my older brother, and it ruined him in a way. I try and do what I can for him and make an effort to be there for him. I don't want to go into too much detail, even with a throwaway. He's a loose cannon. He definitely has emotional issues and he won't seek help for them. He's a pathological liar and slick enough to talk his way out of most things, especially with a therapist psychologist. He isn't self-sufficient and relies on everyone else for everything. Believe me, once I'm all he has left, he's going to get self-sufficient real quick. The thing that really freaks me up at the end of the day, in this long debate about nature v. nurture or eco-evo devo, whichever, how big a part does genetics really play in this? If I have children at some point, will I end up with someone like my brother? What are the chances of that? Yay. It's very sad. My aunt and uncle were always suckers for strays, so it just fed my cousin's sick mind. I think he still may be up to it. He recently came home from jail and my aunt's tiny Pomeranian mysteriously died. She would never tell us how that little dog passed away. I think my cousin killed it. I have kind of the opposite story. My cousin is the son of an absolute freaking monster. I'd ask grandma when she realized her son was a piece of garbage, but she has Alzheimer's and can barely remember his name most days. So, my cousin. Apparently he realized that his dad was a bad person when his dad put forward no assistance when his mom died. He got passed around the family for several years and then joined the military. Lives in Texas trying to instill in his sons the importance and value of a good dad. I love that your cousin broke the cycle. Good for him. I think this is really hard for people to answer. I have relatives that are desperately trying to help their kid not be that terrible person. This kid cannot go to public school. His behavior is truly terrifying and relatives will not allow their kids to be alone with this kid. They have tried counseling, medication, cognitive behavior therapy, and are desperately trying a new program because the last straw will be to seek an external placement. This kid is loved. His parents are doing everything they can to make him and help him be good. They are devoted to supporting his interests and skills. I absolutely could criticize how they parent, but in reality I don't know how they stay sane. They are angels. We just all pray that this kid who is ridiculously smart and talented somehow gets it and realizes that being good even though it is not what you want to do will help you the most in the long term, because this kid lacks empathy and remorse, and if he doesn't come to that realization, animals will get hurt and he will be incarcerated. I don't think he is a lost cause, but holy crap, you cannot imagine the stress and heartache this causes his parents. You can't easily explain away the behaviors of a kid that threatens to kill their teacher, and people lack empathy when you explain that the specialists cannot give you a clear answer as to what is wrong with him. Without a proper diagnosis, it just looks like your kid is a crap and you suck at life as a parent. The unsolicited advice I always get is to beat his butt, which is the opposite of what they should do. I wish I could give them a magic pill. No one should live in fear of their small child. No one should worry about how their child will hurt others in the future. I know my relatives did not deserve this, and this little boy never asked to have his brain wired like this. Currently he is too young to say it's all him, but one day his behavior will be a choice. I have a friend who is raising a terrible adult. He is only 8 right now, but I can see the effects of her lack of parenting now. He is going to be in prison before he is old enough to drink. She is also a terrible person, so yeah, terrible people make terrible people. My parents probably thought I was going to be a terrible person. I bit myself, blamed my brother. I was manipulative, lied constantly, and by kindergarten, my only ambition was to marry rich. I screamed so loudly the neighbors thought I was being abused whenever I didn't get my way. The one time my mom spanked me, and rightfully so, I threatened to call the police. I made her cry more than once. My brother was afraid of me. My parents didn't know what to do with me. They likely thought I was going to grow up and be a serial killer. But then I hit an all-time low. Childhood onset major depressive episode coupled with crippling anxiety. A rescue dog who helped me out of it, along with an amazing therapist. And I turned a corner. By late middle school I was just a weird, awkward young teenager. I liked Death Note, Hot Topic, and being random. By high school I was ambitious, had amazing grades, and a solid group of friends. Still a little weird, but I grew out of it by the time I went to college. In college I laid low, dated, had friends, tried to get through it. Now I'm a successful young adult. I'm happy. I volunteer. I work hard and get along well with my parents. My parents thought they were raising a terrible person. I'm sure of it. But as an adult, I have to say, they did a dang good job. I imagine that actual terrible people come about one of 2 ways. The first is the opposite of myself. They are perfectly fine children who somehow just turn out bad. No reason for it. They just do. The second is they start out bad, like I did, but their parents, teachers, etc. give up on them. They don't get the help they need. They don't get the support. Just my 2 cents as a former terrible person. My aunt's kid is a complete psychopath. He's 12 now and can barely have a single conversation with anyone. He has huge issues being around people and will randomly just go up and push direct strangers over or onto trees objects. He barely speaks a word and spends all of his time on Minecraft. His whole life is that game, and trying to do anything with him that doesn't involve this is horrible. My entire family refused to go out in public with him, and he is not invited over for Christmas. The last time he stayed with us. Feeling sorry for him, heeding my family's warnings, I took him to the movies. He refused to change and wore his pajamas. The theater I took him to has 2 big flights of stairs, gold railings, red carpet, ultra nice. Whilst buying tickets, I turn around to see him Sparta kick a 6-year-old down the flight of stairs and then scream and spit at the mother. I was in horror and both the mother and me froze, and he just sat there laughing. I then took him home and uninstalled Minecraft and changed the Wi-Fi password. Day 1 of 7. The next 6 days was like watching someone coming down from H, with my entire family begging for me to give him the Wi-Fi password, in which I refused. To which during Christmas Eve he proceeded to try to light our Christmas tree on fire and break every present. Luckily my dad caught him and booted them both out of our house. Looking at my aunt, the kid never had a chance, a product of divorced parents, with them pushing him to learn the flute and refused to take him to any outside activities. His father is constantly working, so just left him alone to play Minecraft. Apologies guys, my reasoning of divorced parents didn't mean that's the root cause or any issue. Rather, he is always back and forth every week. They split weeks, and they are constantly fighting in public and during drop-off. They have mediated drop-offs, so he really doesn't have a stable place. Couple the above with his father never being around on the week he's there, it's just a really bad situation, compounded by his surroundings. In fairness, I am a child of divorced parents and was for the most part left alone, and I ain't never tried to use my Christmas tree for kindling, so these can't be the only factors to him. I feel iffy writing about this, but it is very relevant. My aunt's 2 oldest children killed her youngest child. They were 15 and 10. The victim was 6. The older sister was the instigator, and always had been. My aunt and uncle were broke. He refuses to work and was always starting some kind of get-rich-quick business, and argued a lot and had been separated for a time. But there was no physical abuse in the home, especially not towards the kids. But the sister was always a problem, and her dad tried to control it on his own because I think they both couldn't admit that she wasn't just a confused kid. She was a psychopath. She was on antidepressants for a while, but they took her off because she was too zoned out in school. She manipulated her brother, who had learning disabilities, into taking the blame for a lot of their earlier troublemaking, and she would make outlandish claims about her parents torturing her when she got in trouble at school. Once she was only in trouble for stealing a lollipop out of her teacher's desk, and she still got CPS involved in order to distract from her own crime. There is something evil in her that can never be fixed. She has no capacity for empathy. I've been told that relatives could tell something was wrong when she was a year old. She was charged as an adult, has been denied parole each time, but will exhaust her maximum sentence in 9 years. He was sent to a facility for teenagers, released when he was 17, and my aunt put him in counseling and intensive church groups for both of them, but he was never able to forgive himself and took his life in 2014. The parents divorced shortly after the kids were convicted, and my aunt led a grief group through her church but has been inconsolable since the suicide. She is a beautiful person, with so much love for others, and it is so hard to understand how she could be dealt this hand in life. I'd be willing to bet that the little psychopath didn't shed a tear when she found out her brother killed himself. Not me, but when my grandparents had my grandmother said she knew instantly that there was something wrong with her child. When she got older, my mom would steal her parents' checks and forge her mother's name. Once she stole a $100 bill from one of her cousins. She ran away multiple times, ended up getting addicted to drugs, and at 42 is just now getting her crap together. My grandmother insists that her daughter was born broken. I can't speak for my parents, but I can speak for myself when talking about my brother. My brother is 5 years older than me, and my parents have been heavily abusive my entire life. I was diagnosed with autism when I was 6, and my parents immediately pulled me from public school and homeschooled me. My only interaction with another kid was with my brother. While I shied away and withdrew, my brother acted out, and horribly so. I think I realized it about a year after I was pulled out of school. My brother had taken me out of the house. I was excited, but we soon met up with what I could only describe as a gang. Now, I know they had gotten my brother at an early age, 12. The conversation immediately changed from my brother talking to me about light-hearted topics to a laughing, mocking conversation about blood and gore with the older members he'd met up with. All I could do was watch. I remember thinking that my brother was not a good person, and that I couldn't ever see him becoming a good person, and I was right. Half a year later, he was arrested and thrown in juvenile detention for assault. He got out after a few months, as my abusive father is a lawyer, and was back in 6 months later because police had caught him killing people's pets. The pattern continued and when he was 15, he got out and didn't go back. That was because when he turned 17, his long-term boyfriend had him arrested for repeated physical assault and abuse. He was tried as an adult and is now in prison. I think it's probably the fault of our parents. This was about a year and a half ago. I didn't turn out like he did, but I'm under the impression that abuse affects people in different ways. I'm not sure why I turned out differently, but his behavior and our parents' behavior affected me a lot. I still wonder what my brother would have been like had he not developed the way he had. Just wanted to reach out to you, since you're one of the few people who has sort of answered the question. I hope you've gotten out of your parents' house. If possible, you should definitely be seeing a counselor. You're right that part of the reason your brother became like this is because of his upbringing, but that does not excuse it at all. Thanks for sharing. As a terrible person, I will describe my parents. My parents are overly religious. Mother was a children's minister and father is a Sunday school teacher. My parents were overly protective and overly strict. I wasn't allowed to do anything and was breathalyzed every day of high school so I wouldn't drink. This created a forbidden fruit that was women, drugs, and alcohol, and I love all of those things. Not me, but my mum. Regarding my sister, I think, despite the fact my sister is a contentious little madam at the best of times, capable of being nice only when she wants something and becoming vicious and vindictive when she doesn't get her own way, the defining moment came when my sister had her kid. She had him young, and essentially used him as an accessory to her life. Look at me, I'm amazing. I have a child who is my world type thing. In reality, she couldn't be bothered with him. She left him with my mum 90% of the time, and whenever she spent time with him, she was more concerned with playing on her phone or talking to her friends than looking after her child, preferring to let my mum do it. My mum was disabled, by the way, very poorly, and in lots of pain. My mum took to looking after my nephew like her own son, and did a good job of helping him in every way possible, teaching him to talk, walk, good manners, and singing him lullabies and reading with him. All the things my sister should have done, but she preferred to be off snorting coke with whichever man she was sleeping with at the time. Mum would say regularly how sad she was about the whole thing, how disappointed, how worn out and browbeaten and isolated and abused she felt because of my sister. It didn't help she was in cahoots with my mum's husband, bitching about her behind her back and making her feel unwelcome in her own home. Of course, she criticized everything my mother did, quite nastily, and would regularly drop my nephew on my mum whenever mum had plans, just to ruin them, because she knew mum would always care for an innocent child while she was off stealing money from her and drunk driving. There's a lot more to this. I can't articulate very well just how poorly behaved my sister is, and I can't very well ask my mum now, as she died last month. I'm so sorry for your loss. Your mum sounds like an honestly lovely woman. I hope you're doing okay. I saw a doco by a famous behaviorist scientist, can't recall name, who out of interest did all the tests to see if he had a sociopathic disorder. He was shocked to find he checked all the boxes for one of the serial killer type disorders. He worked out that it was because he'd been raised in a loving family that he'd turned out fine. So that's something for a nurture argument, albeit a sample size of 1. Wish I could remember his name. I may not be a terrible person in actuality, but to my parents I'll probably be when they find out how I really act. Please don't force religion on your children. No one wins. Yep, my mom thinks I'm going to heck because I'm an atheist and happen to have gay friends. She certainly thinks I'm a terrible person, but I know I'm not, so whatever. My aunt has a son who has always been different, so to speak. He has always been very violent, liked bloody movies, especially of women being tormented, tortured, killed. He has been known to try and spy on women changing, showering. He was actually caught hiding in a closet when our other cousin was living with them. He also tried to make a hole in the wall to spy on her. Whenever I would stay over, I would lock the door while I showered, and every single time he had to go to the bathroom but would not get out until I called his mom to get him out. He told my cousins, his sisters, how he would kill them and their mom and who he would kill first. He says really violent things and doesn't show any remorse. He also would watch me sleep when I had to babysit one summer. After that first morning, I was legit terrified of going back to sleep when my aunt left for work. He would always touch their dog's private regions and would always take him into the bathroom and lock the door. No one knew what he would do, but you can only guess. Whenever I was around, I would immediately call him out on it and told him it was never okay to touch an animal like that. His mom never said anything, but as soon as someone would say something about him, she would hit him, but it was because she was actually angry at the person for saying anything and took it out on him. She refuses to get him help but has no issue calling my siblings and I pieces of crap, considering we're actually in lot better situations than her and her children. I cut off contact years ago. My dad has some really fricked up family and I don't like to associate myself with them. I'm a terrible person and my parents probably realized it when I was suspended for stabbing a kid in the shin with a pencil for flicking my ears in 5th grade. I haven't really talked about this with anyone before, so this may be a bit of a rambling mess, and I'm on mobile, but bear with me. I worry about my stepson. He has had a rough life. He lived with his abusive mother for 8 years before the courts finally placed him with his father and me. He doesn't do anything crazy. It's just that he lies about every little thing. He lies when there is no reason to lie. It's almost as if he gets a thrill out of it, or he can't help it. I get that lying is somewhat normal, but he's next level. I never know if I should believe him, because I have been fooled by his lies so many times, and it sucks. He is lacking on empathy, and extremely impulsive, which is a bad combo. He is not a good student, and his reading and writing skills are that of a 3rd grader, and he is in the 6th grade. We have had him tested for learning disabilities, and the conclusion is always that he is just lazy, which he is, so they're not wrong. Still, there has to be something else, but I'm not an expert. Another thing that really worries me is that he is extremely unstable emotionally. Really minor things will set him off onto fits of rage or into over-the-top sobbing. It's very strange and kind of scary. Finally, if he is caught in a lie, or doing something he is not supposed to be doing, he will never admit to it. Everything is always someone else's fault and never his. He will go to extreme lengths to avoid taking responsibility. You could have him on video doing something and he would still refuse to own up to it. It's insanely frustrating and worrisome to me. So, I worry that he will drop out of school and turn to crime because it's the easy way out. I don't think he will be violent, but I don't know. He is still young. I lose a lot of sleep at night worrying about his future, though. I know we have to play our cards right as parents right now or he will end up getting into a lot of trouble someday. I hope all of my worry is for nothing. This sounds just like my sister's son when he was younger. He was diagnosed with ADD, put on Ritalin and is now a respectable, well-functioning kid. If he forgets his pill he starts reverting, but when he's on it he's a really good kid. Not a parent, but sister to a terrible older brother, no mental disorders to speak of. He was definitely not on the level of killing animals and threatening people, but he would often get into fights with other students, incredibly manipulative towards people, very emotionally abusive to my sister and I, and stealing all sorts of things, money usually. I believe he assaulted someone when I was in middle school, but fortunately for him they didn't press charges. Not really sure what he is up to nowadays. Last time I heard from him he was homeless and selling drugs up in the Northwest US. He likes. It makes my mother incredibly sad because she did all she could for him. She was a fantastic mother to my siblings and I would go above and beyond for our needs and problems. Her children always came first compared to anything else. She tried multiple times to get him into therapy and help for his issues, but he was too stubborn and nothing ever stuck. Last time they had an in-person interaction, my parents had picked him up from being homeless and brought him to our house. The whole time he was trying to get alcohol and drugs from my brother. My parents offered to let him stay with us so he could get the necessary help, but he told my mom that he just wanted money from them and would rather be homeless and hated them and hated being here. They ended up giving him a couple grand and shipped him back on a Greyhound. I believe this is when my mother finally gave up on him and realized she couldn't help him and he was just going to be a manipulative butthole. It is still a sore subject and I can always tell she becomes upset when he is mentioned. But she is happy because she raised 3 good children out of 4. Honestly, you have to realize, and so does you mom, that 3 out of 4 is more than tons of people could say. Just the fact that she raised a perfect huge viscaria is more than enough. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.